Good evening, everybody. My name is Amudan. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm part of the group Marupakkam. We have been doing this 22nd Madurai International Documentary and Short Film Festival. And as part of the film festival, we have a retrospective of Mr. Sanjeev Shah, senior filmmaker and editor. And we're showing 3 of his films. Today we are going to discuss with Sanjeev Shah and about his films and other experiences. And we have Mr. Amal, filmmaker, teacher, an activist from Chennai, who will be interacting with Mr. Sanjeev Shah. So I invite Mr. Amal to start the proceedings.
Good evening, Sanjeev.
Good evening.
It is nice to meet you online, though I have watched your film, your first film, Famine 87 in 1984 in Delhi. So it has been in my mind. I have been also teaching at Loyola College, Chennai, visual communication. So I was also handling the paper on development communication. I think once I have screened this film, Famine 87, from the VHS tape, which I borrowed from Sendit. So it was really, some of the images are still very fresh and strong in my mind map. And after watching these 3 films, it's very much, almost all of them are connected with architecture, be it in a dam or the water management system or the housing, all that. And you have also, especially in the last film, number of architects have come into the film. And I read in your profile, you were doing in the middle of mid-70s architecture, whether you have completed or dropped out, or with that background, what pushed you to make films on these subjects?
So I was studying architecture between 73 and 75, actually. And towards the end of middle of 75, I kind of started getting disillusioned in a treating the house as a product or a work of art.
Okay.
And I was more interested in looking at the building of homes as a process, as so as a process, and architecture had that very strong kind of narrative in the 70s. People like Christopher Alexander and other people were arguing that a house is a home which people build on their own. It's not something which necessarily architects and contractors build and deliver.
Yeah.
So I was looking for an alternative way to kind of engage with the process of home building. So I eventually landed up in Calcutta, where I worked with refugee resettlement, a refugee resettlement project. And then I got involved with a movement for housing rights. Actually, it extended to a more active role in that kind of work. And somewhere I thought one of the skills that I could use or which I could develop was to communicate with people, and film seemed to be one way of doing it. So I kind of gradually drifted towards learning how to make films. I joined the Film Institute in 78, 77. And so that's how I got into films. My primary interest, even when I joined the Film Institute, was actually learning how to do documentary films more than fiction. I was not really fascinated with fiction, feature films. Because I thought engaging with people is something that interested me more. and trying to bring out their stories or tell stories about things that were never discussed by and large. So that's how I got into this kind of area of filmmaking.
This particular subjects, no, of each of these three films, how did you get involved?
So basically, my work for the last whatever 35 years, 40 years maybe, has been connected with this kind of engagement. So I've worked with films which have been on a post-riot situation. I've worked with films which actually looked at the impact of dams in the country, across the country. I've done a couple of films on the Narmada displacement.
Okay.
So I've largely worked with films which are so-called socially kind of engaging in that sense. I don't like to use that word, but so it's always been that kind of work. That's what has interested me, and I find that more challenging and engaging in a way. So yeah, so it's always been this kind of work, and it's not only always been films. I have done graphics, I've done photography, I've done. So depending on what is required in a given situation and the tools that are needed to communicate that, I've done slideshows. There was a time when you could do, you used to do slideshows with synchronized sound and all that.
Yes, in 70s, 80s.
Yeah. So I've done all kinds of things like that. And a lot of work that I've done actually has been on VHS and on, because that was the only tool that was affordable and convenient. So a lot of my work has been in that non-mainstream space.
Yeah. As the filmmaker was promising to the man on the road in Famine 87, what is your experience in sharing these stories with different audiences, and maybe particularly like any academic field of architecture or government housing units or officials or students? What is your experience?
So the Famine film has a kind of backstory. It was the 4th year of drought in that region, in Kutch. And there was huge migration of cattle, and Kutch, that particular region was primarily a area where there were cow herders. They were not even agriculturists. They were just cattle herders.
Yeah.
And they had moved, actually they were moving in thousands from Kutch through Gujarat to as far as Maharashtra, and just to save the cattle.
Yeah.
And this is what we were seeing here. And we were kind of familiar with that area. We knew people there. So we said we should at least try and understand what is happening. And so we went and made the film. It was completely our own money.
Okay.
And just 4 or 5 of us were kind of concerned with what was happening. The film was shown in 4 parts actually in ISRO. ISRO had a rural network of television in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat actually. So it was shown there in 4 parts. We took it around. We showed it to we actually showed it to some government officials. We showed it to Rajiv Gandhi, was the prime minister then. So we had thought that it might be a slightly more open kind of administration, but like all government agencies, they were not willing to. I mean, their thing was solution law.
Yeah.
Hum kya kare? Anyway, so And I don't really think films beyond a point can affect much change unless they are connected to a larger movement. You know, they can be used by a larger group of people to bring about awareness, to talk about issues which normally are not talked about. But on their own, I don't think they can do beyond this.
If I may interrupt here, in fact, Anand Patwardhan's Bombay, our city. I was in Delhi studying theology for a year, and we were part of some communities in the slums of Delhi.
Right.
We used to take the film and screen in different jugis, and there was a lot of protest and so on. And of course, in the run of the days, they were all smashed. Similarly, in Chennai also, there was a women's movement trying to work on housing rights. And then we translated, dubbed it in Tamil, and then we went around screening. Yeah, it's again a drop in the just got lost. Yeah.
The thing with, say, something like Anand's film is that it, at least Bombay, our city, locked into a larger movement.
Yes.
Across the country, there were a lot of groups working with housing rights. And it could easily fit into that.
Yeah.
For a film like Famine, it didn't fit into any such
movement. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very localized issue.
It is localized. It is also, in a sense, temporary.
Yes.
The next year there were rains.
Yeah.
So people forgot about the issues, though the film talks about much larger issues of what development is doing, not what lack of rain is doing. But that never gets discussed beyond a point.
The interesting, I was very much taken up by the last story of the jackal. The jackal and the dog and the rat. No?
Yeah.
It's a telling reflection on today's situation.
Yes.
I was really amused as well as enamored by that story.
So, see, that is the thing. I mean, we people have so much wisdom at a local level. You know, they know their own situation. They know what is going wrong.
Yeah.
And as a policy, we've made governance such that we will not listen to people whose life we are affecting or impacting. And that has been, I mean, look at the farmers' agitation. The government is just not willing to listen. You know?
Yeah.
So it's the same story over and over again.
What about the second film, the Tar? No, is that climate as well as the environment is still the same, or is there any change in that area?
Oh, that area has been, even when we were making the film, it was on the verge of being kind of decimated. There are a lot of stories within the film itself, like Jodhpur, for example.
Yeah.
We shot the film in 94, 95. And we were told that till 5-10 years before that, Jodhpur did not have a water shortage.
Yeah.
They did not have bore wells. They did not need any of that. The traditional systems that were built, say, 300-400 years ago were still sufficient to provide, I mean, were good enough to provide sufficient water.
Yeah.
What happened was that around that time, mining happened. So the first mining happened in the catchment areas.
Yeah.
So all the water that was coming into the lakes kind of got disrupted.
Yes.
That's when it started. And somehow that's the problem with delivered services, you know, piped water coming.
Yes.
People don't ask where it's coming from.
You
know?
Yeah.
That's the main problem, you know, but it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And unless you collect that water, you're going to use groundwater. And that's what's happening. then around, before that, actually, the Ganga Sagar canal had been made,
Okay.
which came from Punjab through Rajasthan.
Mm.
So very much like the Narmada, with the promise of water in the desert.
Yeah.
That caused immense harm to the ecosystem, immense harm to the lives of local people. You know, there was flooding, there was, because the soil, subsoil in that
Yeah.
area is impervious, so the water doesn't go down.
Yes.
So there were huge lakes which are formed where there were seasonal farms.
Mm.
So of course there are lakes, so say, okay, fishery, now you can fish.
Yeah.
Rajasthan, traditionally, nobody knows what a fish is.
Yes.
So people from Kerala were given contracts to come and fish there. So it's just bizarre, you know, it's a continuous story of how we've messed up things, you know.
Yeah, I particularly remember one lady saying about wells and pipes.
Yeah,
There were wells, we had our own time to take, we know how long the water will be there and
yeah.
we have to ration out. But when the pipe is there, we wait and wait and wait.
There's no water.
Do you have like the whole, at least all these three films have a pace, you know?
Right.
So how do you determine the pace or the duration of these films? What is your approach?
I don't know how to make short films. So I think, see, no, my approach has by and large been that I go and have conversations with people.
Mm.
You know? So, and when you start doing that, it's always going to be longer than normally, you know, because you're not asking questions.
Yeah, it
You're
is not
having
a
a conversation.
schedule, yeah.
And I mean, of course, one has a general idea of what one is looking at, but
Mm.
there are no specific questions to which we are looking for answers for.
Yeah.
So invariably, I end up with longer conversation pieces in my films.
Mm.
And once I get that, I don't know how to make it shorter. So most of my films are 50 minutes and longer.
Mm.
But also some of the subjects demand that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really make a, you can, I mean, but I can't. So
yeah, it's also the philosophy, you know, of how people look at it, you know.
right, absolutely.
We are giving, I mean, it's a voice to the people and their wisdom. So it has to be, they have to be given that space. It is not the filmmaker who tries to edit
And I always find that, you know, if you, even while watching the film, you get into listening to people talking. You hear the voice, you hear the way they say things.
Yeah.
It has much more impact than.
Yes. Yeah, I drew a lot more lessons than from my reading or listening. From some of them talking about what is development,
Yeah.
what is the home, you know?
Right.
They are really the kind of a wisdom which you will never get in any book or any.
No, and they've been trying to save their homes for the last 30 years in Madhya Pradesh. You know, the threat of being drowned out has been there for 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it happened last year. Some of the villages went under.
This one particular person in Bengal, who is a refugee from Bangladesh, I think, he talks about vast documentation. He has written about 600 and
He's one of the more celebrated writers of India now, Manoranjan Vyapari. He's just published his third book, I think, in English. I mean, translated into English.
Okay.
And I think he got this the Sahitya Parishad Award also, I think, last year. So he's a very celebrated writer now. Very interesting story again.
Yes.
completely uneducated, learned to write and read while he was in prison.
Mm.
And that's where he took off from.
Yeah. I think UNESCO talks about intangible resources or intangible culture.
Yeah.
I think your film, by talking to them, you get to know a lot of intangible culture. And I see this whole, this nature, people, culture, the interaction between, among these three, and the outcome, be it for people or against people, is very much, it comes through in the film, through the conversations with the subjects. So that way I have learned a lot from these films of yours. Could you share some of the experiences of making these films?
So
I see a very small crew in your first and second film even, and a large crew in the third film, and it's more recent.
So the third film, it's a large crew, but that's because it also is a vast film. We were shooting across the country.
Across the country, yes.
And we had a very short time within which we had to do that. So we had about 8 months to finish the film and deliver it. Not even 8, actually, less. So we had to have teams which were shooting simultaneously.
Okay.
So I had prepared a kind of template for some of the stuff that we needed, and so that's why it looks large. But normally when I shoot, never more than 4 people. 3 if I can help it. As we are getting older, we need one more person, younger person, to help us.
Yes.
But otherwise, usually it's the camera person, the sound recordist, and myself. We work with that kind of a team.
Okay.
Usually. Of 4 people maximum.
Yeah.
Because a large team in a lot of these situations becomes an imposition on the people. You become very obvious. It skews the equation, at least for me.
Yes, the power relations equations.
Yeah, everything changes. So
it alters the subject or the whatever comes out.
And say from the time when we shot Famine, which was one of the earliest films which was shot on U-matic. So it was a big camera and a big recorder, and but and now you have these tiny cameras, which become even more discreet.
Yeah.
So,
can you share some of the experience of other films, like other than these 3? Any specific film or?
There was this, again, we did another film, which is a very different kind of film, where 3 friends were circumnavigating India on a motorcycle. So one of the friends was the person who is usually my cameraman, Navroz.
Okay.
He's also a very avid motorcycle rider.
Yeah.
So they did about 18,000 kilometers in 50 days, 54 days. Going as close to the borders of India as possible.
Okay.
So I traveled with them and we made a film on that journey. So to me, that was very fascinating. I mean, just to travel across the country, Of course, it was a very kind of quick journey in the sense that you never stop for more than a day at a place.
Yeah.
You're just riding a motorcycle. But just to see the country in one go. And it's a 3-hour long film that we made. But you see, I mean, that's what you see there in that film. So for me, that was a very exciting kind of experience, so right from Bangalore to Leh, Ladakh, at 18,000 feet, shooting in snow, shooting in very difficult conditions, and going to the northeast, going to Kashmir. So and that was a very exciting kind of experience. Very different film from what I normally do. And the strangest thing was, I mean, I normally, you ask people, and why are you doing this journey? And people who riding motorcycles, I mean, the thing is, there is a motorcycle, there is a road, so we ride. So I mean, that was the end of the story in most ways. So then to find meaning to the journey was the exercise. Yeah, so I've done a few films in the Tehri region, 3 actually short films, short meaning 24, 25 minutes each, which were on women's initiative, but not with an NGO or anything necessarily, but what people were doing, what women were doing in that region with, because there the situation is that most men migrate in the Garhwal region.
Yeah.
So only the women are left behind to do everything. Men come back once a year or something, if that, so there we had just a 2-person crew. We didn't even have resources to do more than that. So that was a interesting travel, a journey to make.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of things which are exciting in many ways. You discover a lot about the country, about yourself, about people, and you get an opportunity to bring some of the stories back to people. So, but there have sometimes been situations when, and which I guess happens with most documentary filmmakers, is you get caught in very tricky situations. There is, you have to actually run away or do things like that. That happens more when you're doing slightly more political kind of sensitive issues, I mean, matters. So particularly when you're shooting in riots or in a situation of strife, that happens a lot. Yeah. It's happened a few times, but not really.
Nothing happened.
No, nothing other. And eventually you manage, if you're good with people, you manage. See, also there is a huge advantage of your belonging to the majority caste, class, whatever,
Yeah.
that helps.
You have connections.
No, even without connections, I mean, in a riot situation, by and large, you get bashed up. I mean, you might be given a tight slap or something, but nothing more will happen to you.
Okay.
If you are not a Hindu, then you can fear for your life.
Yeah. I was filming on one of the river pollution in Tamil Nadu. Then we also saw, we were sitting and discussing near the river and filming, and we saw sand mining in the river bed. So my producer said, "Come, we'll shoot a little of that." So they got to know, people came. So somehow we got the wind of it. They packed me in a bike and then pushed me out of the location.
Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah. Have we been teaching?
Amal, sorry to interrupt. Amal,
Sure.
sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
There is another person in the discussion. He or she raised the hand. Can we invite the person?
Oh, we could see.
Sure.
Of course.
Because she came
Hello?
on the screen. Then yeah, please.
You can ask the person.
Hello. I see only Vivo 1921. Can you please come online?
You want to say something because you raised the hand.
Yeah.
I think that person showed his her hand actually, saying that he wanted to say something. Anyway, sorry for interruption. Continue. Yeah.
Sanjeev, have you been teaching in any of the
Not
institutes?
really.
No, not really.
No. Occasion, I mean, and that too long time ago,
Okay.
but not really.
As a film student
Yeah.
and as a filmmaker, do you have any school of filmmaking or any person, any this thing in your mind, in your back of your filmmaking?
Not in that sense. I mean, I like the work that a lot of people do,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never really had. I mean, I really respect what Anand does, for example.
Okay.
I might, I've actually worked with him on Bombay Art City and a couple of other films.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, I really don't have that kind of, even the fiction feature film that I made, I thought very hard about it. I thought hard about it for 30 years actually, and I haven't found. There are 5 or 6 or 10 films that I love. There are 10 filmmakers whose films I like, but there's not one singular school of filmmaking or filmmaker which I think but I do like. I mean, there are all kinds of documentaries. I mean, I really, when I saw Hours of the Furnace, which is this Argentinian documentary Solanas made.
Yeah.
I was very impressed and moved and touched by it. But when I see it again, it has a relevance in the time it was made.
Yeah.
It had great relevance also in a particular political context, you know.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of films like that made around that time, 60s, 70s, which because I was actually in a film school and I saw all those films, I was more impressed, or they impressed me more in a sense.
Okay. Do you see, or how do you see the role of documentary films and documentary filmmakers in the society currently, in the kind of change we would like to have? Do we have a role, or what is it?
I think the filmmakers have as much of a role to play as say a writer or a poet or an artist in that sense would have, or a journalist for that matter.
Yeah.
The only thing I can really look at is that, say, from the time that when I started making films, which was there was no video then. So it had to be celluloid.
Yeah.
So it had its own issues, you know, the expensive, the equipment was cumbersome, and so on and so forth. Now, you know, anybody can go and make a film, practically. I mean, so it has opened up the possibility of people saying a lot of things that they want to, which can cut both ways, you know.
Yeah.
But so there is a huge possibility of putting forward ideas, of arguing for change, arguing for a different kind of worldview, if you want to.
Yeah.
There is not much access to audiences, but you know, you can put it online and see where it goes. So I think it's a very promising scenario in many ways. And I'm not only saying that you need to make political films or anything. You can make films that you want to make films about.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who do that. So it's possible to do that, and it's possible to get it across much more easily than say 10, 15 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we need to do it, I think.
Sanjeev, I used quite a number of films when I was teaching documentary films, particularly development, history of development, and so on. So I was wondering whether the whole a set of films can be interwoven with the curriculum. Okay, and it could be also like even any subject, if it is on health, in courses of medicine or health management, in terms of architecture, this kind of things in various subjects. So do you see any possibility in that line or scope?
So in the 80s, the Dutch government, I mean, in Holland, they made this animated series called the History Book.
History book.
I don't know if you had the
No.
chance to see it.
Okay.
It was for school children. It was animated.
Yeah.
And it was a history of the world, political, social, economic history of the world.
Okay.
From the left perspective.
Okay.
And it became a school textbook.
Okay. This is from Dutch. Which country?
Yeah, it's a Dutch film.
Okay.
Very interesting, very Eurocentric, of course. But so it has been done.
Okay.
At least there's this one example. Then I know a friend who actually made in Bangalore, she did a whole series of films on education, in classroom education, where it was done by video, you know.
Okay.
So a lot of people have been doing it in some ways.
Yeah.
But you look at the online classes now, they're all trying to do that.
Yes.
You know. So I think one has to capture, I mean, at least enter that space, even if you want to present an alternative viewpoint, you know, somehow there has to be a way to get into those spaces, which we have not been able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly when I was talking about development, the alternative paradigm of development.
Yeah.
These films have came in such a resource, no, to really make sense and then convince
absolutely
the students or anybody for the matter. Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's part of the problem. I mean, there are organizations, NGOs, which have commissioned these kind of films over the years. And then they're sitting in the library.
Yes.
You can either buy a DVD or maybe, but nobody has thought of actually putting in an effort within the organization to, you know, make it available in a different form. Is my sense.
Okay.
I mean, like the Star film, it was actually a series of 7 films made around the idea of water.
Yeah.
And it was commissioned by the CSE, Center for Science and Environment, Delhi. So for a while, I guess, and it was a BBC co-production.
Okay.
So it must have been shown on BBC, whatever happened here. But after that, I don't think much has happened with those films.
Yeah. So the life of some of these crucial and significant films has to be extended.
Yeah, I think you should just make it available. People should, I mean, believe more in copyleft.
Yes.
And just flood the market with and people who can afford to organizations, you know, once they've been funded or have the money. I mean, knowledge has to be made slightly more accessible to my mind.
And now more and more the knowledge sharing in formal or informal setup has totally changed.
Yeah, yeah.
We have to suit the needs of the situation.
Absolutely.
Have you made or attempted any film on now in terms of architecture? No, there is a counter school of architecture. Even the materials and stuff, they don't want to use cement. They go for mud traditional methods. Have you approached or come across?
I haven't made a film on that.
Okay.
I know people who are working like that, but
Yeah.
but again, see the problem with that also, at least the people I know, is that it's restricted to, it's not mainstreamed yet.
Okay.
The use of alternative materials. How do you do it? How do you have to train people? So some people are doing very interesting work.
Yeah.
And very sustainable. It's given employment to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But either it stays at the level of alternative housing for the poor, or in very, very few cases, in very, very expensive private homes.
Very niche kind of.
So somewhere it has to find a balance between the two, slightly more mainstream. I don't know how that might be possible.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
Also, architecture today is in a large way controlled by product manufacturers, you know.
Yes.
So the aesthetics of our cities are determined by companies which make those aluminum boards and companies which make glass. And it's not architects who are designing in that sense.
With the manufacturer driven.
Yeah, in a large, to a large extent. I mean, so there are very fine architects who are doing good work, but by and large, we are doomed in that sense.
Yeah. In every sphere, it's a market, no? It's a market oriented, and how the producers tune the actual producers, no? The design of their production.
Yeah. So it's medical representatives on the one hand.
Yes.
And product salesmen on the other.
Yes.
So it's that.
Yes, Amudan?
Yes. Yes.
You have anything to?
Yes. Yes. Actually, it has been a very wonderful discussion. And as a very studious person, Amal has prepared wonderful questions, and we've been working with each other for some time. We know each other almost 30 years. She's always been a very professorish kind of a person. Has come very much prepared. Nice to actually, because some interesting things that he actually asked. For an example, the kind of and you also answered it. Maybe if you can explain it, you spoke about the Dutch experiment of and using documentaries as an educational medium, but somewhere the documentary is not still. I don't know that it's more concerned to be. It can be used as a wonderful educational medium. And as rightly said, these days in the online education, people are really using lots of such videos and material for educating people. But that is being used only a certain kind of people alone. But earlier, we really, since our governments really believed in that, using, like you mentioned about the ISRO and all. They really believed in using documentaries and video for education. Sometimes people we used to reject the whole idea as a propaganda, and that the whole idea of using documentaries as a communicative medium has become completely outdated now. So it's like almost like you have to make it as aloof, as free as possible, the film, so that people can interpret their own way. That kind of a filmmaking theory is being discussed now. So what do you think? So I mean, what do you think about it? I mean, the whole, because you belong to a certain different, totally of different generation where you believed in using documentary as a material to use to communicate, to discuss, and now you're in a different platform, totally in a different era. So
Yeah, absolutely.
how do you look at the change that happening in documentaries?
So see, it's very interesting when you talk of DECO, which is the ISRO experiment. It was television which actually made the difference, not documentary per se. They actually got television to the villages. So instead of Doordarshan, they saw this channel, and that had a very different impact, because in a sense it was official, but it offered an alternative story. It offered them their own stories. So even the programming was very radical for the time. It was about people who were watching those programs. So I think in some ways, if we can get that back, even at a very small localized level, a lot of experiments are being done with radio in rural areas, in tribal areas, and even in small villages. A lot of independent initiatives where people operate local radios. And it's not just news, it's also sometimes they do very interesting stories. With television, it's a bit difficult. How do you do it? The technology required is very, very complicated in some ways. But if you make films, how do you distribute them? Those could be the questions one has to deal with. As I said, if a lot of people make their films available freely, and if there are platforms available to just make them available, let them be. I don't know if that would make a difference. I'm just thinking out aloud.
Sanjeev, I was in an island near Australia, called Timor-Leste, which became independent in 1999.
Yeah.
Okay, I was there in a television production house, and we had, of course, funded. It's a Christian organization. They got funds, and we used to make documentaries for development and peace.
Right.
Okay, there are 13 districts. So we take about 3 to 4 or 5 months to go do some research, find out peace building stories or conflict stories or underdevelopment or development stories, and then make small episodes. It's an half-an-hour program, 2 half-an-hour programs, which may have about 3 or 4 episodes or stories. And we also had the opportunity to telecast it in the only national television twice a week. So we used to also go to the same district and then do at least a half a dozen screenings where we did the research or the filming, and we used to have a lot of discussion and how to proceed further and so on. And some of the stories have also pushed the government to do some action. For example, one particular place, there was no doctor, no nurse. The compounder was everyone from sweeper to the doctor. So immediately they placed a medical officer there. Okay, that is one thing, like a film or a documentary as life after the final cut, or the so-called final cut. And I also saw the film Human by a French filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and they have made complete resource material, like discussion material based on that, and that has been used in a lot of school setup, education institutions. I was also proposing to Amudan, like on a thematic collection of films, like films for ecology, films for health. So if we could put together some of the key films and then develop a sort of a curriculum, okay, given the educational setup, and which has more of this private entity and the whole ideology or approach, this kind of intrusion, I would say, you have to intrude wherever possible whenever possible with these kind of materials. I think that's again another different role. Both the political, economic, other scientists or activists and filmmakers can come together and then support or complement the counter the so-called education.
Yeah. No, but it's important to create the context in which this film will be shown.
Yes,
I think that is important.
sure.
It cannot be a film screening. It has to be part of a.
Yes,
The film should not be the center point.
yeah. It has to be part of a movement or a movement in a sense, maybe out in the field, in the community, or in any community, in any setup, be it an
No,
education.
you have to prepare. How do you talk to people about that film?
Yes,
That is important.
yes, sure.
Yeah, I guess. But currently the situation is so dismal.
Yes. Now we have to go underground, like whatever you want to do.
So,
Can't speak anything. Like some of these quotes from your subjects in these three films are very,
yeah.
very directly hard-hitting and very,
Yeah,
very.
so yeah, well,
Yeah. So thank you, Sanjeev.
thank you very much. It was wonderful talking to you.
Evening with you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Amadan, for the opportunity. In fact, I met Navroz at one of the screenings in Chennai, and I
Okay.
used to tell him that I had seen the same time in '94 is something like a war,
Oh, okay.
and I must have screened it for every batch of students in my college. So it's nice again to have met you.
Yeah. And when things open up, we'll meet in Chennai
Sure, sure.
or Ahmedabad.
Yes.
So thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you,
Sanjeev.
Amadan.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
Amal.
Amadan. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Good
Okay.
day. Good day.
Bye.
Chalo. Good luck to you for the rest of the festival.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Amadan.